Morning, everybody. Welcome to session 3 of Google Analytics 4, and today we're going to be talking about migrating from Universal Analytics to GA4. I've broken the migration up into about, I think it's 6 or 7 steps, but just to make things a little bit easier to understand, I thought we'll break it up into steps. The first thing to say is normally when you talk about migration, it is moving wholly from one thing to something else and deleting what was there before. But the difference with GA4 is actually we're doing this as a phased migration, and it won't actually be until the middle of 2023 that actually Universal Analytics will completely go away. So this is not at this point completely replacing and retiring Universal Analytics, but it's going to be a case of working out your own schedule, program, plan, whatever you want to call it, of getting from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. Now, step 1 we've covered in session 2, which we've got the recording to the YouTube video there, and that is basically the very first thing that you've got to do is create your GA4 property and get it configured. And we went in through some detail in session 2 about that. Ideally, you would have had that step completed by 1st of July this year, 2022. So when Universal Analytics sunsets at the end of June in 2023, you can do the year-on-year comparison. So we could do in August 2023, we could do a full comparison of July 23 compared with July 22 data. So as each month goes on, we're losing more of that comparison. So that's why it's really important to get GA4 set up as soon as you can do, and I'll take you through each of those steps in a little bit more detail. Liam's just said I can hear what you're saying, but the microphone seems to have a tiny weird vibration behind you. That's because we've got the lawn being mowed at the back of us at the moment, and the AI software is doing its very best to do the noise cancelling. So sorry about that. Hopefully they will disappear very shortly, but if not, I'll re-record this and we can see it again. But they're very, very close to us at the moment. I could turn it off and you won't be able to hear a thing. I can barely hear myself think at the moment, but very bad timing. Okay, so sorry about the sound quality. Hopefully it'll improve as the session goes on. So again, coming back to step 1, get GA4 property configured and get it installed and set up. Start recording some data at that point. Step 2 is kind of an extension of step 1. This is once you've got GA4 installed and configured. What we need to start doing at this point is start looking at what configuration you have in Universal Analytics. And the best thing to do is just do an audit, if you like, of your own property and views within Universal Analytics, because what we don't recommend that you do, there's a few tools online where you can migrate from Universal Analytics to GA4, and it's supposed to take all of your settings from Universal Analytics and push them into GA4, but it doesn't really work that well. So our approach is to completely set up including unique code specifically for GA4, code specifically for Universal Analytics, and have the two as totally separate, independent systems. So what you have got to do though is audit all of the things that you've got set up in Universal Analytics. That's your first job, and that will include events, page views, that sort of stuff that are in Universal Analytics. Then goals, Now in GA4, goals are called conversions, and they're actually quite different. Goals within Universal Analytics, we were limited to 20 goals per property, per view, sorry. But now we can have 30 conversions in one GA4 property. We haven't got that many people that we know of that go beyond that that limit anyway, so it shouldn't be too much of a bother for most people, and it's quite easy then for you to aggregate those conversions or goals if you do need to. Next thing is a fairly unused part of Universal Analytics and GA4, and that's content grouping. Content grouping allows you to classify pages, or in GA4's case, events that are part of one particular group. So it could be all pages within, all blog pages are considered to be in the blogs content group. All product category pages on an e-commerce site could be called collections, or product category pages. So if you do use that feature, it tends to be used on larger sites where you've got lots of people that are contributing to huge amounts of content. But it is a useful feature. But at least go through that. If you don't use it, that's fine. Move on. The next one is custom dimensions and metrics. Custom dimensions and metrics have been used over the years to widen the detail of the data that is available within your analytics view, or in GA4 analytics property. And this could be a case of adding more information to a page. It could be performing a calculation on some data to work out profit margin, and so on. Again, take a look at what configuration you've got in Universal Analytics, and shift that over to GA4 in the next section. Probably one of the most important parts for both Universal Analytics and GA4 is making sure that your referral exclusions are in place. Within Universal Analytics, they're in the referral exclusion section. They're called something different in GA4, but this would typically be PayPal.com, could be different payment service providers, a whole host of different domains might go in there. And the reason they're in place is to bind all of the session data together to make sure that you get good attribution, so you know where your revenue or your bookings or conversions have come from. So really important to check what's in there and document what settings you've got in Universal Analytics. Then the next thing to do is take a look at any, unfortunately they're called product links, although they're nothing to do with products or items in a e-commerce sense, but they refer to things like Google Ads, Ad Manager, BigQuery, Google Search Console, Google Merchant Center. They're those links to the other mainly Google products that are out there. So again, see what you've got linked up there, make a note of that, and then when we get onto the next stage, we can look at how that is configured. A lot of people use Universal Analytics for audience management and share those audiences with Google Ads and other platforms. And again, have a look at the configuration of those and document that. Some of you may use Google Sheets, Google Data Studio. You might have other BI tools or reporting dashboards or databases that data flows from Universal Analytics to those other platforms. Probably the most common one is Google Sheets and maybe Google Data Studio. And it can be a bit more tricky to find those within Universal Analytics when you're going through that audit yourself, because often you've got add-ons and plugins within some of those other tools that pull data into those products from Google, rather than it be linked in a product link section and be pushed out. So it's usually pulled in. So do watch out for that, and make sure that you've got all that covered as well. It's probably worth saying at this point as well, if it's okay if you're a small organization and there's only 1 or 2 of you that do this, but if you're in a large organization, then you might need to be emailing people throughout the organization or getting a meeting together to see how people use the Universal Analytics data, just to make sure that you don't miss anything out. So that's for that's really, I suppose, the first step, although it's called step 2, but a good audit of the Universal Analytics environment that is in place at this point in time. So as you move on to step 3, we're now starting to consider what your requirements are within GA4. It's a good opportunity when you're migrating to GA4 to take a good look at what you've been recording, the settings that you've got at this point, and then decide what you want to keep, decide what you want to get rid of, but also start to think about new settings and configurations and different ways of reporting that you might want to put in place. Now, at this point, we're not actually setting any of the explorations, any of the reports up or anything like that, but we're considering how the data is being recorded and how that's been stored. So that's really what it's about at this point. You might, the end goal might be having a report that provides data on things that you aren't tracking at the moment, but again, sitting down with your colleagues and working out what you do want to track and what you do want to report on would then give you a list of different things that you do want to track. And it could be other websites, it could be applications, it could be different parts of website, different domains, a whole host of different things that you might want to do. So now's a good time to make those changes when you're implementing GA4. One of the big changes with GA4 is goals are no longer called goals, they're called conversions, and also there is no view feature in GA4. We just have the account and the property level, and with that comes some different limitations within those settings, and all of the view features, the filtering and that sort of stuff are all done at report or exploration level in GA4. So you do need to think about what goals or conversions that are now called you do want to have in place. Another big thing that has changed with GA4 is we don't have destination and engagement goals anymore. We just have events, and this new model means that you have to configure the events in a slightly different way so they can record conversions for the destination and engagement goals as they were set up in Universal Analytics. Now, an example of a destination goal, which is probably the most common type of goal that you'd have in Universal Analytics, would be the view of a thank you page or a purchase complete page or a booking complete page. That now needs to move to an event that has a name and some data associated with it. An engagement goal would be when people have spent a certain amount of time on the site or looked at a certain number of pages. Yeah, those sort of things are referred to as engagement goals, and they're now dealt with as audiences in GA4. So good review of what you actually want from GA4 is what step 3 is all about. Step 4 starts to get a bit more complicated now, because this is the actual implementation. This is the setting up of GA4, the configuration and installation and migration, if you like. First step is to configure the events. Now, GA4 comes with some automatic or enhanced tracking events, if you like, things like scroll tracking, video tracking. We covered that in session to. Those events, you just need to decide whether you want them on or off. By default, they're on, but you can turn them off if you don't want them. You then move on to custom events or events that are not automatically created. And with events, you've got a couple of different ways of setting those up. The best way to set an event up is within the code or tag if you're using a tag management platform like Google Tag Manager. But you can also use the GA4 web interface. We discussed this in session 2 as well. If you don't have control over the code or the tag environment, then what you can do is use the GA4 web interface. And I'll just open that up. Each one of these has got a link out to Google's own documents to discuss this. But this shows you how to modify and create events using the user interface. So these things take you through all the different things that you would need to do to create an event. So it could be as simple as creating an event for when somebody fills in a newsletter form, or it could be something as complex as a purchase event with some data that's associated with it. Where possible, get that done in code using what is now called Google Tag. It used to be called gtag.js, or within Google Tag Manager. But if you can't do that, if there's it's difficult or it's expensive for you to do that, then see if you can do it in the GA4 web interface. It's not that geeky thing to use the web interface, but you have got to understand a little bit about HTML and about the document object model of a browser. Once you've got those events configured, you've got all of those set up, then as they start to record, each of those events starts to be recorded, you can then create conversions from those particular events. So if we have a look at, let's just take a look at the demo account. So you can see this is just the Google Store demo account. You can see all of these existing events that are in place, different things that are going on, and we don't have access to change this, don't have permission to change this, but you can mark any of the events as a conversion if you want to do that, and that's how you would configure a conversion. In Universal Analytics, we had a section specifically called goals where you would configure each individual goal, but GA4 has moved us across to a wholly event-based model, and we can mark the conversions in this way. So anything that you would want to class as a conversion is marked here. You will see some events purchased, for example, the default state of that is a conversion. Anything else is just recorded as an event, and we can interrogate that data if we want. But if we want to go into attribution and into finer detail, then it's better to mark things as an event. But again, consider what conversions you are going to need in GA4. And remember that they used to be called goals in Universal Analytics. The thing that's a little bit tricky is getting destination goals over to events. Now, as I said before, the destination goals and the engagement goals don't exist in GA4. So what you have to do is make sure that a destination goal is, or a destination goal as it was, is converted to an event. And again, there's Google's own documentation on that, this guide on destination goals. Some of you will be familiar with the Universal Analytics configuration of that, and then it just takes you through how to create that. But essentially what you're doing is turning a page view. Destination goal was basically a page view that met certain criteria. You turning that into an event, and you can do that with the web-based interface, or you can do that in code. The engagement goals are a little bit different. as the engagement goals to replicate a pages per session goal, or time on time on site, those sort of things, is a little bit different. And what we have to do in this case is not set up an event, but we actually create a new custom GA4 audience. And then what happens is those users that fall into those engagement goals then are actually an audience. And again, here there's step-by-step guide of how to configure that. It's these type of conversions or goals aren't used so much by e-commerce sites and transactional websites, but they tend to be used more by information sites and large blog sites, big information sites, that sort of thing, because people are much more interested in how people are engaged or using the site. Also, the way that that people use websites has changed quite significantly over the years, and we get a lot fewer individual page views or changes of the URLs, and we now get more scrolls and more interactivity clicks within the in some cases the same page. And that's one of the reasons why GA4 moved to an event-based model, because the page view is it's an interesting metric, but it's becoming less and less useful. We want to see how people are actually using a site. And yeah, I still think we're a long way away from having a single page website that works well for most businesses. But actually having the event-based model and making sure that we can properly track all of the things that occur on a website now within one URL is very very useful to be able to do that, because it gives us more representation of how people are actually using sites. And of course, not everybody views a website through a laptop or a desktop. A lot of people are viewing different types of sites from mobile devices. So that's one of the very good things I think about GA4, one of the big moves there. So moving on from conversions, if we take a look at content grouping, now again, it's probably a few of you are using content grouping. The big change in GA4 from Universal Analytics is content grouping within Universal Analytics was configured within the web-based interface itself. In GA4, now you have to specify it in code. And if we look at this reference material here from Google, this takes you through how to set up a content group now, either using Google Tag, which used to be called gtag.js, or Google Tag Manager. But essentially what we're doing now is assigning, as we fire the tag for that page or event, as it may be, we then set the content group name within that event, albeit probably a page view in this case, but it could well be a viewed section of content on a single page that you want to group up in a different way. But it has to be done in code now, unfortunately. But it can be done with Google Tag or Tag Manager, and there's details of how to do that in there. Custom dimensions and metrics pretty much work the same way. They're pretty, I wouldn't say identical within GA4, but they're very, very similar. Custom dimensions and metric configuration are in two parts. The one part is looking at the web configuration, where you set up the dimensions and you set up the metrics, and then the other part is the code on the site itself and getting that configured. One thing to look out for here, though, is the way that most people configured custom dimensions and metrics was the first dimension that they added is called dimension 1, second 2, and that sort of thing. So if you need to keep the IDs in the same order, then you need to create those dimensions and metrics in the same order. But again, it might be time to review that. You're going to have to change the way that the code operates anyway to push the custom dimensions and metrics in there. But it's quite easy to replicate that. The code's very, very, very similar. The settings are very similar. There are there's reference material on how to go and set those up as well. Just here. The other thing that Google point out, specifically in GA4, is that they want you to avoid creating unnecessarily high cardinality custom dimensions. And what that means is actually explained, because it's a bit of a peculiar way to explain it. But it means that you shouldn't have that many different types of names of custom dimension. So you wouldn't have customer names in the custom dimension. So basically what they say is a high cardinality custom dimension is 500 different names of or values of a custom dimension per day. So try and keep it to a narrower set of data, but there's more information on that. The main reason for that is the way that rows are processed in GA4, and it can slow things down with the reporting, or it can actually sample or limit the amount of data that's available in there. Liam's asked the question, is channel grouping available in GA4? It is available, but actually what we'll do is it's not a standard report that is available within GA4. We have to create an exploration, and we'll be doing that, I think, in probably about session 5, I think it is, that we're covering that sort of things, where we record with GA4, we record everything, and then we build an exploration to build that. And that question has also come up the last week or so, relating to Google Ads, specifically people that have got view through conversions in Google Ads, and how they look at that data within GA4. But there's much more granularity of the data in GA4, so we can build those different channel groupings up, but there isn't anything like we would have in Universal Analytics, where we define as part of a standard report what a default channel might be. So it could be, if you look at organic traffic, it could be traffic that's come from Google that's got the medium organic, or Bing with the medium organic, or another search engine that calls it something different. So there's nothing predefined now, but it is possible to report on that. But I think that'll be probably about session 5. We'll be covering that. So custom dimensions and metrics, as I say there, have if you are using those or want to consider using custom dimensions and metrics in GA4, then do take a look at those 2 documents just for a little more information on how you do set those up. Referral exclusions I mentioned earlier on, really important. They're tucked away in quite deep within the admin interface now, and I will just walk you through where this bit is, because it's not that easy to find. I've put the little navigation trail there, so it's basically within GA4 in the admin section, underneath data streams. Choose your data stream, then configure tag settings, then configure your domains. I'll just show you what that looks like. We're going to data streams and go into your data stream, then go down to configure tag settings, and then configure your domains. So it's in there. So this is essentially it's two things in one. It's the auto link domains, as we used to call them in Universal Analytics, but it is also the place to put the referral exclusions. So you just add condition and then say domain that contains this. One of the big things that is useful with this is we can use regular expressions, and in some cases, depending on how your checkout or payment service provider works for your organization, you can have this massive list of, sometimes it could have been 30 or 40 or more domains that you wanted to put as referral exclusions. But now what we can do is just write a big pattern that and paste it all in as one regular expression if you wanted to do that, rather than having to add individual domains, which, although Google told us that one day we will be able to do that in Universal Analytics, they never rolled it out. So this is a nice shortcut, particularly for those of you that have got large e-commerce sites with some payment service providers that show the different banks as referring sources of traffic. It's buried a bit deeper in the configuration, but it's actually easier to configure. So whilst you're adding those referral exclusions, also think about any other domains that use with the same Google tag or tag manager coding, and that could be other domain names. It could be subdomain names. It could be booking system or checkout domain names, those sort of things. Anything that you're actually tracking needs to go in there as well. All those domains need to go in there, as well as the referral exclusions for the payment service providers and the banks. Moving down to product links. Again, this is nothing to do with products that you might be selling. This is all to do with Google's products. You need to create links for all of those products that you had in Universal Analytics and replicate those in GA4, or add new ones if you hadn't got them set up in Universal Analytics. Then by all means put them in place in GA4. Mike's just asked, do we add a list of domains into that section that we want to include, and by default anything not included will be excluded? It is really badly worded, actually. The referral exclusion list in Universal Analytics isn't a list of domains that you want to exclude. It's really a list of domains that you want to bind together, so we can see where data has been attributed to. So normally what would happen, you would add them to that list, the configured domain lists in GA4, if you were seeing revenue or a conversion being attributed to that referral, that domain name or URL itself, rather than it coming from Google Organic or Google CPC or Facebook CPC or whatever the source medium of traffic might be. So if you're seeing traffic come from yourself, or traffic come from your bank or payment service provider that is generating lots of revenue or lots of conversions, then you know that you need to add it in there. By default, the only domain that will be in there will be the domain name that is configured in the data stream, and let's just discard that. So the only one that is there by default is what goes in here, and it's really important to get this configured right. So make sure it is HTTPS, and make sure that you get the host name correct. So if it's got www.yourwebsite.com in there, it needs to have that. If you have the non-www version and the www version in there, you want to list the primary one in here, but then you need to add the other ones in the configuration list as well. and again, that's under configure tag settings, configure your domains, and you would add that domain with those conditions in there. So back to the product links, link those up. At this point, you keep all of the Universal Analytics product links in place as well. At this point, we're not moving away from Universal Analytics, and the two can sit side by side. What I would suggest that you don't do at this point, though, is within, let's say, Google Ads, you don't import conversions from Universal Analytics and GA4, otherwise you're going to get into duplicate reporting issues and that sort of thing. We'll look at setting you a single source of truth in a short while. In terms of timeliness and getting things done quickly, setting up the audiences within GA4 is just seen a typo there. Setting up the audiences is really important to get done as soon as possible, because once the audiences are set up, you start building your data. Remember, you can record no more than 14 months worth of data in audiences. After that, it starts getting removed. So get your audiences created and get them populating as soon as you can do, because you're going to be needing to use that data when you fully move over to GA4 for all of your other products. So that's quite a high priority task, is to get the audiences set up. I know it's towards the bottom of the list, as is e-commerce here, but getting that set up is really important. There are a lot more opportunities at the moment with audiences within GA4, because if you're in a sensitive industry, financial services, healthcare, that sort of thing, you can remarket to people in those audiences if they're in a GA4 audience, but you can't create a tag within Google Ads for one of those sensitive audiences and remarket or advertise to those people in that audience, or a similar audience of that. They may see all that loophole at some point, but at the moment it's open, so we should take advantage of it. And then finally, e-commerce. The GA4 schema for e-commerce tracking in GA4 is completely different to Universal Analytics. Again, there are some workarounds that I've seen people put in place where they read the Universal Analytics data layer and then have a piece of code that spits out the GA4 schema for e-commerce tracking. But I'd strongly recommend that you don't use that, because what will happen when you're ready to get rid of Universal Analytics and need to take the code off the site, you've probably forgotten that you've done that, and then you'll end up breaking Universal Analytics and GA4. So go for fresh new code. It can be deployed by Tag Manager. It can be deployed by an app or through hard-coded code if you want, but don't reuse Universal Analytics tracking code for GA4. Don't rely on that. Keep the two separate. So then when you're ready to get rid of Universal Analytics, it is simply a case of removing the Universal Analytics code. Once you've got all of that done, it is really a case of checks and audits over a good period of time. And a good period of time is probably at least a couple of weeks, maybe a whole month. Initially, you'd just do a quick check, probably 48 hours after you have implemented the changes to GA4, just to make sure that you think things are working as they should do. Then let it run for a bit, get a week or two's worth of data, and then you can start comparing the data with Universal Analytics. And some of the, I did a few implementations of GA4 last week, and we're already seeing where Universal Analytics had dropped some of the conversions and some of the revenue and orders, transactions, we're seeing that GA4 actually seems to be recording more of those and attributing them more correctly. So what I think you'll find is GA4 will show you more transactions, more data, and will be more accurate in what it's recording than Universal Analytics in most cases. If you notice that it's recording less, then it will probably be a configuration problem or a coding issue, but you want to find that out as soon as possible. But after you've made the changes, leave it at least 48 hours before you you start interrogating any of the data, and then only look at data that is 48 hours old. So if you wanted to look at Monday's data, then you probably wouldn't look at Monday's data until Thursday. So you give yourself a good clear couple of days before analyzing data from when it's actually come in, because GA4 records the data instantly, but it backfills a lot of the attribution. Cross-domain and cross-device tracking data gets aggregated, and it can take 48 hours for that to be right. It's pretty accurate within 12 hours, but if you're doing proper validation, then really you want to give it 48 hours before you look at the data that's been recorded. Another good check, if you've got an e-commerce system or booking system, is looking at your own order management system and comparing the data that is in there, how much total revenue, gross revenue, net revenue, however you record it, that you've got in there in the internal system, CMS, CRM, order management system, whatever it is. Compare that with GA4 and see how that compares. And again, we found in most cases that the GA4 data is better and closer to the actual data than Universal Analytics. The one thing to watch out for there is obviously a lot of people now looking at content management platforms, and people are in some cases preventing analytics from running, and people are using the move to GA4 as an opportunity to implement cookie management or content management, whatever you want to call it, and therefore if you've got that implemented, then you will get less data because you're encouraging people to not opt in. So be aware of that. We have got people now who implement the content management platforms where we're actually running analytics on how many people have opted out. We're not recording obviously any personal data there, but it gives us then a percentage of the people that have decided not to have analytics tracking or that sort of things, if whether they've opted in or purposely opted out, or whatever it might be, and that's showing some interesting data actually, so you could put those things in place. And then there's a bit of a checklist, really. Check all the events and conversions are recording properly. Check content grouping if you've got content groupings in place. Check custom dimensions of metrics are populating correctly. Check attribution is working correctly. And again, that's mainly due to the configuration of referral exclusions or cross-domain tracking, which is the configure your domain part within the property in GA4. Check product links are working in each platform product. Most people, the main one they'll use there is Google Ads, so make sure that the audience data is flowing in there. Make sure that conversions are being populated if you're actually importing the conversions in there as well. Make sure that your audiences are being populated, they're being built as you would expect them to be, and just check that everything's okay there. And then finally, check revenue, item, and other e-commerce data is being recorded accurately. Sometimes we find with the implementation of GA4 e-commerce that people have not configured it properly. So if you had a checkout that contained 3 items, then often only the first item is being recorded, and the revenue is just the revenue is the whole revenue, but it doesn't match the number of items they've got. So you're looking out for those sort of things, making sure that the right data's in there for the item name, the item price, just making sure that's right. If you track shipping price separately and tax separately, make sure it's all configured correctly and you tracking what you want to be tracking. Checking order IDs, those sort of things. So yeah, it's just a validation of the data. Once all of that is in place, then you're on to the final bit, and the big decision really is moving over to what's called the single source of truth, which is basically using when you're going to move to GA4 as the center of all of your analytics data, when you're just going to rely on that. It's quite a big decision to make. I would say don't set a date until you know that you've checked everything is right and it's all working okay and you're happy. And then I would give yourself at least a month's worth of data from the point that you know it's working okay to when you consider shifting over to GA4 as your single source of truth. If it is possible, I would suggest that you schedule that date for the 1st of January 2023, because what that will mean is then all of your products and everything are starting probably at a quietest time of the year as well for most people. You can get that bit done between Christmas and New Year, the flick over. Then you start the new year knowing that you're using GA4 to record everything. So you've still got a little bit of time. It'll soon be Christmas, but you've got a bit of time to do that. But you would need to make sure, really, if you were going to move over 1st of January, that really you've got a full month's worth of data in November or probably December to make sure that that everything's working okay. The sooner you can move over to that, the better, but don't rush it until you know that the data is working and being populated properly. Google haven't officially declared a date when they're going to delete all the Universal Analytics data, but if you look and listen to quite a few people, the rumor is that come the 1st of January 2024, all of the Universal Analytics properties will be removed, or access will be removed. You won't be able to see them. You can start backing that data up, and what I'm going to do in a later session is show you how you can archive the Universal Analytics data for future use. But for the moment, you need to concentrate on getting GA4 implemented properly. But the sooner you move over to that, the better for you, as long as you know that it's all working properly. But the most important thing is to get things configured properly. When you do move over to GA4 for your single source of truth, then at that point, because it is a single source of truth, you should remove Universal Analytics links from all of those other products, from Google Ads, from Ad Manager, from Google Merchant Center. Basically, you're disconnecting Universal Analytics from all of those products and using GA4 as your main reporting source of data, be it feeding Google Data Studio or Google Sheets or Google Ads or whatever. So big decision to make. Start to get it planned out now. Get the implementation as right as possible, tweak it over the next month or so, and then set yourself a date. If you don't think that you're going to be ready for 1st of January, then push it back. You can leave it until June 2023 if you want to. Remember, it's not a case of you losing historical data, because you'll still be recording all the data in GA4. It's still being recorded, but you're just not using that data to drive other campaigns and other products. So move as soon as you're ready, but don't move until you are ready. That's the message there. So that's it now, really, for all of the technical side of things. That is the first 3 sessions out the way. Session 4 is really starting to look at the start of analyzing data within GA4. And the first thing we'll do is take you through the basic analysis tools that are available, to standard reports, if you like, that are in GA4. And then from session 4 onwards, we're going to be focusing entirely on analysis, reporting, and going through all of those bits here. So if anybody's got any questions now about today's session, the migration, or session 2, where we talked about the installation and configuration of GA4, please ask. If not, what I'm going to do is start putting together a series of individual videos just on how to do different parts of configuration within GA4. Any questions? I don't think there's any questions there. So once again, thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. The recording of this session will be available in the next 24 hours or so, and I look forward to seeing you on session 4. Thanks very much, everybody.